Hello everyone. It's Denise from Foursquare Market Farm, and this is the first official video for the Spin by Design Facebook group. It's a Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs Journey group, and so welcome to Chapter 1. Now, Chapter 1 is pretty thick, so it's going to take us a while to get through this, and basically you can just go into the group. And on the left side, if you're on a computer, if you're using a phone or device, across the top, you'll see a section that says units. And what I'm going to do is break the different topics down into questions or thoughts or techniques as we move into the book where we're actually doing particular techniques. And each one will have a post. And so you can comment or show your pictures or make your video responses or whatnot underneath those chapters in the unit section. And so this should be interesting. It's a new feature of Facebook. It's going to be, I think it'll be easier to track your progress that way. And then after you complete or you read that task, you like that task, or you complete the task, you just click done. And that way you can kind of keep track. If you're not keeping a physical journal, you can kind of keep track of what you're doing in that section. So that's how we're going to work that. All right, so also too, it's advantageous to have a copy of the book, because I don't want to violate any copyright laws by showing you large portions of the book. But if you don't have the book, through the group discussions and the videos and the actual demonstrations that are planned, you can pretty much follow along. So I'm just saying that. All right, at this point, I'm just going to do a lot of gabbing. And so here's some locks to look at for eye candy. And one of the things I love about the first chapter is that Sarah Anderson points out that there is such a beauty and wealth in spinning your own yarns. Just in case you didn't know that already. And that's one of the reasons why I started spinning, was because I wanted a natural fiber. And at that time, I couldn't really go to a local yarn store. You know, there was like Walmart and Joann's and Michael's and the craft stores. And when you go in, you get a selection of acrylics. You get some cottons. There's lots of cottons. But you get very little wool. You get wool that's mixed with acrylic, you know. And then you get like the fisherman's wool. And so the fisherman's wool, if you ever use it, is really not the softest wool if you were looking for something soft, and it's generally thick, so you're not like getting any lace weight wool or something like that. So there's very little variety. And I decided that if I wanted these particular qualities, it was a yarn I had to spin for myself. And so even better, now that there's a wealth of yarns, and there might have been before, it's just that I wasn't really into like the catalog shopping, so I didn't know about some of these yarn companies and things. So I don't know, maybe there was before, but maybe there wasn't a lot of a wealth of different types of yarns if you go back. Well, as a spinner, now you can customize not only your type of yarn, your look of yarn, but your breed of yarn. And I'm a big proponent of breed studies. I know a lot of times the spinners have all these wonderful blends, and somebody throws a blend together and everybody's like, yeah, I'm using this merino something blend or whatever blend, not really thinking about the actual qualities of each of those yarns in that blend, because seeing roving and top is a lot different than seeing the raw wool. But when you do a breed study, you learn the qualities of each of those breeds, and you learn how you can get a diversity of use through choosing specific breeds, or choosing specific blends. And it just really makes the experience more enjoyable, more customizable. And so Sarah Anderson goes in to talk about fiber choice, determining what it is that you want to do with your fiber, determines which fiber to choose, its hand or its handle, how much twist you need to put into a fiber is based on that fiber, and its crimp. So you kind of have to consider that. And then there are particular uses of fibers where you may have to change your technique for spinning or your technique as far as knitting or weaving or what have you, in order to make the maximum use of that fiber in an area where it may not necessarily work as well, you know. So, for example, if you're using a super soft merino as a stock yarn, it's not always the best choice, but there may be a way to cable the yarn or something like that that would give it an extra strength. So, just really keep that in mind. And then there's also certain things that you can do to a fiber. Let's say a mohair, where if you spin it really tight and hard, it comes out like rope. So those are things you learn and you get to know as you customize the fibers. Okay? So, and then she goes, just to put this plug in, because a lot of times there are people who they spin and they say, well, I don't worry about it. I just spin for the enjoyment, and they really don't worry about it. And that's great. That's really great. But also there are those who are a student of the skill, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anybody tell you well, you're taking the fun out of it. No, not if that's your kind of fun, then go for it. If you want to have predictable, reproducible results with something that will be durable, then it is advantageous to learn the characteristics. It's advantageous to plan. It's advantageous to learn specific techniques to help you along on your fiber journey. So there's just totally nothing wrong with that. You can just spin for the zen, or you can spin for a purpose, whichever one. Either way, this book covers all those aspects. Now, this is one of the points in the video where I'm going to show you the book, because I don't have a sample set up on the spinning wheel. Be basic, because it is freezing here in Ohio, and all my dogs are cramped into my room, so there's no spinning wheel set up for today. All right, now, of course, yarn is all about the twist, basically. And, I mean, that's how you call it yarn. It needs to be twisted. The fibers have to be twisted. And twist holds them together. And that's what makes yarn. If there's no twist, there is no yarn. Okay? And a lot of times, I said a lot, don't I? A lot of times. Okay, new spinners are struggling with balance. It's over twisted, or it's under twisted, over plied, or under plied. And balance is one of those things that it just takes time to learn. And every fiber is different. So you may find that you did that wonderful Cheviot and you're like, oh yes, I'm a pro at the Cheviot. And then you go and do the merino and you're like, oops, I over twisted that. Okay. Or, you do the Lincoln long wool and you're like, oops, I over twisted that. So it's a balance, and that's what you're trying to do with this yarn. So basically, Sarah Anderson describes it as the amount of twist you put into a yarn is energy. You put a certain amount of energy as you twist the singles in one direction. And for most people, the direction they tell you to start in is what's called an S twist. So you're spinning clockwise in this direction. That's the way it's done a lot of times. Okay, so then when you go to ply, you have to match that same amount of twist in the opposite direction. And that's what makes it balanced. It's a balance that you put in, and there are ways to do that. You can count treadles. But you know what? When you're spinning, like, who really does that? I mean, I think there are some people who do, but I don't really pay that much attention because I'm in my zone when I'm spinning these things like that. So there are ways to count, but I really don't. There's just, you get a feel for it after a while, you know? You kind of get into like a standard memory thing where you spin a certain way one way, you spin a certain way another. And down here, she kind of shows you an idea how to do a control sample. And I do this a lot, especially when I'm trying to achieve a particular thickness or weight of yarn. You're spinning along here. You pull about 1.5 to 2 feet. Freshly spun singles, I usually do just a little less because I have a hard time getting them apart again. But in this case, this is a control sample that she cuts off to save for later, especially if you pause in the middle of your spinning. So that's why this one is so long. So at any rate, you pull out the piece and you allow it to twist back up into itself. And you get an idea of the thickness of the yarn after you make the ply. And this is really good. Like I said, if you're making a particular weight of yarn, you want to test it. So you spin a little bit, just a little, test it out, make sure that's the thickness you want. And I generally lay mine up against my spinner's control card. And if it's not the thickness that I want, then I know before I've spun a whole big bobbin that I need to go ahead and take some fiber out of the drafting zone or add some fiber to the drafting zone. And that is how I judge my thickness of yarn if I'm spinning for a particular weight. So just in case you didn't know that, just a handy dandy little thing. Okay, we already talked about the Z twist and the S twist and the Z twisted yarns. And then there's a little section about measuring balance. So like I said, you can actually use a device, a tool, a protractor, but there are devices specifically for it, so that you can measure the amount of balance that you have in the yarn if you would like to do that. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay. All right, now, and then she makes a little note down here about keeping the balance. And it says that many spinners think that a freshly plied skein of yarn hangs straight. It is balanced. That's not so, okay? Mostly it's underplied, okay? So be careful about that. You really want to not just say, oh, it's hanging and it's good. You need to have a look at the twist. Okay, so she uses a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Then you can really see that it's really good and plied. And you can actually measure the angle of the twist based on that, okay? So those are just ways for you to have a look at the yarn while you're spinning, and then you can judge for yourself how it looks and see where you're at with the construction of the yarn. Okay, that's all for this portion of chapter 1, because I want to try to keep these under 15 minutes so I'm not just gabbing away. But this is where it's really going to get interesting, because for the next few pages she talks about coming upon a fleece that you found raw and how to choose raw fleeces, how to wash them, and how to prep a raw fleece. And for me, that was the most fun of my spinning journey. So can't wait to talk about that. See you in the next segment.